Hello, friends. I'm Melissa Esplin. I am from Utah. It's been fun to see where everyone's from. I think we've got just about every state represented here and some Canadians too, which is really awesome. I am a calligrapher and artist. I live in the snow-capped mountains, and it is literally snowing outside right now as we speak. And today we are going to do some lettering practice, a little bit of scripty calligraphy. And then we're going to talk a little bit about addressing envelopes because this is that season where we want to send our loved ones some some care and attention. Um, yeah. About today's class, I'm going to walk you through that real quick. Um, we are going to make these cards, and I have made these cards in three different colors. The red for something really festive, a craft color, and black. And honestly, you can make it in just about any color. You can do white too, but I love how on especially like the craft and the red papers, you see the white popping really well. You see the red, you see the gold, you see all three of those colors come through. And it's just a really nice color combination. Very, very festive. Uh, for the materials that I'm using today, I've got three Jelly Roll retractable pens that I found at Michael's. So if you don't have them, you can find them locally or online. I have the gold and the white that are available in the craft uh, sampler. And then I have the red that's in the classic sampler. And I also have a pencil. You'll want a pencil. And optionally, a Bic pen. I didn't put that in the product description, so you can just use the pencil, but I found when transferring the materials from the handouts, the Bic pen works just a little bit better than the pencil does. So just keep that in mind. So I also have like a regular pencil. You can use any kind of pencil. We're not super specific. The paper that I'm going to be using today is from Legion. It's their, let me pull it out over here. It's their Stonehenge craft paper, but any kind of craft paper will do. I really like how it's got some squish to it. It's not super hard, so it has a bit of a pillowy texture to it, but it's still quite smooth. You'll want a smoother paper, like a watercolor texture, like a cold press or a rough press is not going to be ideal for this particular craft. And then I have an envelope that I've gone ahead and addressed. And this is, let's, hold on just a second. I'm going to just put that here so I can see what's going on, what I have on screen and what's focused. So we've got some ideas for easy envelope addressing that anyone can do, and our fun cards. Before we start our cards though, let's take a look at the handout. The handout is linked in the chat. If you scroll through the chat, you can find the link to that download. You can download and print it. If you don't have the handouts today, don't worry, you can print those handouts whenever you can. But I will show you exactly how to draft this particular design out without tracing. I'll talk about a little bit how to get these forms specifically. So without further ado, let's work on these forms. So I have written out a skeletal structure of the first 5 letters of the alphabet. And we're going to build up these letters with serifs today. And these serifs are kind of a block serif. And I want to give you some ideas on how to approach just about any letter with just about any type of serif and feel confident in what you're doing. So let's zoom in here just a little bit. Get that nice and focused. Okay, So I'm going to use my red pen so that you can see. The letters are really light and hard to see. And I will show you, I'm using my red pen so that we hopefully see a little bit better. If I need to grab a thicker marker, please holler in the chat. But basically what I want to do here is create a block that outlines each one of those skeletal shapes. So we've got the left-hand side of the letter A and the right-hand side of the letter A. And I'm trying to keep these blocks equidistant apart. So I want this to be consistent width all the way across the board. And I'm closing off those shapes. And then for the crossbar of the A, I'm basically making another block. So that's what we want to visualize when we're creating our letter forms. When it comes to adding those serifs, our serifs come on either horizontal or vertical. They don't follow any other line besides that. So we have our top bar, we want to have a serif here. So we could create a point up here, but I don't like that for this particular style. So we want to visualize, let's see, two-thirds down this first grid mark. And we want to come out a little bit like so. So that is our first serif right here. Now the bottom, we want to visualize that two-thirds mark here on both sides. And we want to come out on both sides as well. And how far you come out to create that serif is really entirely up to you. I tend to measure with my heart. I'm not being super exacting. And why am I measuring with my heart? Because these letter forms are organic. We're drawing them by hand. If you wanted it to be perfect, I would highly recommend going and typing it out on a computer with a font, because there are so many really incredible fonts that have these perfect serifs. I love hand lettering because it creates this very organic shape to it. You look at how each line has a little bit of movement, a little bit of personality, and that character comes through, and you know it wasn't printed, it wasn't mass produced. There was actual care and attention taken in order to create those letter forms, which just elevates the message that you're sending to your loved ones anyway, because they know you didn't just print it off of something, you made it by hand. So it's that time that really makes a huge difference. So when it comes to this letter A, we can visualize, let's just mark this up really quick. And so I've been doing calligraphy since, well, my first experience was in 7th grade, and I really took to it. But I came back to it about 15 years ago, and I'd been doing graphic design, and I came back to just custom letter forms. I kept coming back to this idea of the handwritten letter, and I realized that I'm not really great with words. When I write a thank you note, it's "Dear Mom, thank you for this. Love, Melissa." It doesn't mean that I don't mean those words. It's just I'm not particularly verbose. So if I can write it beautifully, then I feel like those simple words come across with just as much meaning. Okay, so let's take a look at the letter B. We've got our basic block that creates the spine. And then for the rounded bowl on the top and the bottom, we want to outline the outside and really kind of trace along the inside with a letter with basically equidistant, trying to make that pretty even. If it's not perfectly even, again, it's okay. Trace that outside bowl and try to make that pretty equidistant there. When it comes to the letter B, we want the top bowl smaller than the bottom bowl. It creates more balance. Then I'm going to come here and I've got that 2/3 mark right there on the top and on the bottom, and I'm going to create my serif right here and just come out a little bit. Just come out a little bit, and then we can fill in that shape. So this is pretty rough, but I want you to get the idea of how these shapes are formed so you can visualize them and create whatever sentiment you want on your own. Okay, so with the C, this is where things get a little tricky. So I'm going to draw my C. My C is really very circular. Trying to get curved shapes to be very even is tricky for me. I struggle with it. But again, it's just those organic shapes that we really like. So for these serifs, again, we either go horizontal or in this case, vertical, because our C doesn't end, it ends on a bit of a slant here. And it starts and ends both on a slant. So we want to create a vertical and horizontal serif. And then we can fill it in that shape. Okay, with the letter D, it's going to be very similar to the B. We have our spine here. And then we have our bowl, which kind of extends just a little bit above and below that baseline. We want to create that consistent line there. And then here I'm eyeballing that 2/3 mark here. And I'm coming out and over, out and over. And then we can fill that in. So we see how we're creating this consistency all the way throughout these letter forms. Really all it is one, our letters are upright. So all of the spines or backbones of each one of these letters are pointing upright, vertical. The other thing is we're not adding contrast. And what I mean by that is every line has, ideally, the same thickness. And then we're trying to create the most consistency possible with those serifs, creating those serifs about the same, stemming from the same point and roughly the same size. And so we can work our way through the whole alphabet, creating these letters. And you can really, if you see something, say on a Christmas card, a holiday card, or even like a shopping bag of some kind over the next season, and you're like, oh, I really like that lettering. I really, really like that lettering. Pay attention to those details. How wide or narrow are each one of the letters? What angles are the letters being written on? What kind of serifs are being used? What kind of contrast is there? And based off of all of those details, you can figure out the rest of the alphabet and easily mimic a style that you've found and you enjoy based off of those details. So we are going to do the last one. I'm going to do the S because that is really one of the most difficult letters to do. So I'm going to pencil in my S shape. because it is the curviest of all the letters. So I want to create my, my block form here. So I'm going to start here and I want to come around this point. And then I want to start here and come around this point. So I come around to the apex of both of those curves, because then I want to connect this dot, this line, with this corner, and this line with this corner. So our curvature is going to be similar, but different. So let's start with this top one. We want to start here and end here. We come along this top curve, and then we come to this apex point right here, and we want to be equidistant from that apex, and then come around and create that equidistant. And then from here, we can follow this line and be equidistant all the way across and up here. So a couple things that I want you to notice here. First, it follows the same general shape of the skeletal structure. However, we have our skeleton, it doesn't match it perfectly. This top curve is smaller than the bottom curve, just like we have in the B where the top bowl is smaller than the bottom bowl. It's important to take those into account. So that's why we're starting here, working our way around and then mimicking that bottom shape, because you want to emphasize the bottom bowl first, and then whatever space you get left is the top bowl. So from here, I want to add my serifs. And we're doing these vertical, they need to be vertical. Our lines don't end vertical, but we're going to make them vertical. So that's all we have to do with the letter S, and then we can fill that in. All of the other letters of the alphabet are pretty self-explanatory. The M and the N are a little tricky too. Would you like to see the M and the N? I think we've got some time before we switch gears to creating our card. Because if you're going to do something that says Mary on the front, you should probably feel confident in drawing your M. So our letter M, and the proportions I'm using here on our practice sheet, are based off of classic Roman proportions. So your M is just as wide as it is tall. It's basically a giant square. So I'm going to draw my two backbones here on either side, basically creating my box shape, my square shape, and then a V in the middle. So what I want, I'm going to create my stem here and my stem here. It's going to narrow it a little bit, so I'm going to move this out just a bit. Okay, so I'm going to go from this corner to this corner. And you see how if I pull from this top right corner of the right backbone to the top left corner and find my apex here at the bottom, you see where we pass through this skeletal, our blocks that we've made. That's the bottom half of the middle of the M. And then the top half of the M is following that top left corner of the right-hand box and the top right corner of the left-hand box. And then we go down and we match our distances there. So then we'll come through here and add our serifs on either side. And we add only one serif to the top on either side, not in the middle here. You don't need to add that in the middle. And then we fill it in. We've got our letter M. It's quite a stately M. It takes up a lot of space. And so when you're doing your designs, don't budget the same space for every single letter. Your M is going to take up far more space than the letter I or even the J. So that's what we want to be looking for. These are our basic rules for creating serif work. And then you can play around with it. So let's say if we wanted to do something a little bit more creative with, say, our M. I'm going to create my box on either side. So I've got my basic shape here, but I want my serifs on the bottom to swoop out and have a scallop. I know exactly what to do. And I can swoop it out here and I can do a scallop that goes into the M there. So let's draw that out real quick. So by creating these skeletal structures for ourselves, we can really have a lot of fun with our letters. So now we have something that's very different from this. It has a very different feel to it. So you can play around with it. You can have fun. I really want to give you some tools to be creative. I want to give you ideas for really applying this into whatever interests you. Yeah, the scallops really do soften it up. And Patty asks, is this the same for the letter W? Yes. So let's look at the W real quick. So the W is actually bigger than the M. I do have time to show the E. I can show the E. Yeah, I've got 5 minutes before I want. So the W in other languages is called W. Like that's, I think, the French, which is a double V. So you're doing 2 V's. So this is basically the width of my M. This is the width of my W. It's almost it's like basically 1.5 times as wide as everything else. So it's a lot. Now, if you're adding contrast, it's the top left to bottom right lines that get the thicker stroke. But because we're only doing everything gets the same stroke, we're starting from the top left. We're drawing along this line here, along our basic skeletal line. And then we're coming over. I should probably do this in pen. So we're coming over and we're tracing that line until we get to the bottom here. We want to draw up that apex here. And actually, sorry, we want to meet that apex here. So we come over here and we draw our line here. So our skeleton stroke is at a different angle than our blocked stroke. So then we come over here and we come to just below this apex here. And we want to draw our line to that apex. So at this point, we should be basically mirroring everything. And then we finish out up here to the last stroke, top right. So these 2 strokes follow the skeletal line, and then the middle strokes do not. So hopefully that makes sense. And when it comes to doing serifs, you do not do serifs here. Nope, nope, and nope. You only need to do serifs here and here. And you can do it on both sides. So the serif on the outside is going to be a little bit smaller in appearance than the serif on the inside, just because of the angle of your letter. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay. The point in the middle of the M, you can soften it by just creating a rounded point instead of having it be super pointy. So if you wanted to just basically round this just basically to the same roundness, the same diameter as your serif, if you were to do that, then you could just kind of have it that way. But I won't think I would round this part. It just kind of depends upon how you're feeling. But again, it boils down to playing around with it and not being afraid to play around with it. There will not be any lettering police coming after you and saying, oh, you can't do this. That's not the point. Just have fun and be expressive with it. So we've had a few requests for the R and the H. The R is going to be very similar to the B, where that top bowl is going to be bigger though. And then we have a leg that comes off of it. So we want to follow that backbone, follow this curve here, and mimic that interior with the interior curve. And then our leg of the R doesn't come off from this point here. It always comes right there. You don't intersect more than 2 lines in calligraphy, just about any point ever. There may be 1 or 2 instances with classical calligraphers that have intersected more than 2 lines, but you don't see it very often at all. So the R is going to have a leg that comes off of it like that. And then you do the serifs here, here, and you don't really need to do it here, but you can. With the P is going to be the same as the B, except this bowl is going to be bigger than both the R and the B because you don't have anything else going on. So you see how the bowls are 3 different shapes. These top bowls are 3 different shapes. Okay, the E and the H. So we've got the E really just has these blocks that come off, and the middle is always smaller. It's more narrow. That block, that width right here, is shorter than this width here. And your serif only comes down here, up here, here, and here. You can add serifs here if you want to. That's up to you. The F is going to be basically the same thing as the E, but this drops down. And the H is really just a little narrower than the M. Well, it depends upon how you want to do it. But well, we'll do the H because we're going to move on to the
Melissa,
card design.
there's someone asking if you could do G as well.
Oh, G is a tricky one. Okay, we do need to do G. So G is just like the C here, but we come up here and we have a serif that comes in there. That's really the only difference. Everything else is done the same. So you have this nice rounded corner around. So you've got your circular shape that comes up and stops just shy of creating a full circle. And you create a nice corner here, create this block here, and then add a serif to the interior. That is a good question. And the Q, what do we think is going to happen with the Q? We just basically round this out all the way. And then we can add our serif here that comes off the bottom. You don't actually have to serif the cue really at all. I would soften this and create a bit of a compound curve here, just because you do have this pointed line, so I wouldn't have it be an actual block. So that's another good question. Okay, so with our holly, we are basically just doing, like, this top part is what we did with our V and our W, right? This top part is what we did with our B, but it's happening on both sides, right? The O doesn't get a serif, and the H, we have serifs on all top, bottom, and horizontal sides. So we're basically doing the same thing that we've been practicing, just in this. Now, for the sake of time and time management and everything, you have your handouts and you can trace everything. I will be tracing the rest of this. And what I would do to basically lay this out, I would get my pencil and very lightly, I'm going to do it pretty hard so you can actually see what's going on, but very lightly, you would draw your top line and your baseline, and then right in your skeletal structure here, and then you want to build out these shapes. And when you're drawing your skeletal structures, make sure that you give yourself room between your letters. So I was a little bit generous with my spacing here and very, very stingy with my spacing here. So I'm actually going to move my Y over. And you build everything up. So I'm drawing this really dark. I don't want you to draw this so dark, because by drawing everything really, really dark in pencil, you have a lot of erasing to do. But if I were to draw really lightly, you guys can barely see that on camera. But I can see it with my naked eye. And once I'm done with the design, it almost disappears and I don't actually have to erase that much, if at all. So that's just something to think about, playing around with how light or how hard you press on your paper when you're drafting something out in pencil. It gives you a lot more or a lot less work on the back end to erase those lines. So just think about that as you're drawing your cards. But for the sake of today, we are going to trace. You have your handout, and this is something that I've covered before my classes. If you've returned and taken multiple classes of mine, I thank you for coming back. And this is something that we've covered many, many times, is creating yourself a tracing paper, a tracing page. So on the back of your handout, you want to get your pencil, and you can use a mechanical pencil, or if you have like a softer pencil, like a 2B up to like a 6B pencil, that's going to give you a better transfer. But basically, you just scribble. And the tighter your scribble pattern is, the better it's going to transfer through. So you want to scribble and lay down as much graphite as possible. So pressing hard here is actually to your benefit. And you want to apply tons of graphite on there. And I've also created little markings here. You see that? That's where I want my card to line up with the design, because I can see to the other side. So I can just hold this down, just kind of pinch it together and flip it over. And this is where you want to have the ballpoint pen, and we can trace our design. So I'm going to come over here and go through and just, you want to hold down your paper firmly. You can, on the backside, tape your card to your practice paper so that it doesn't budge. So if you get interrupted in between tracing things out, it's not too big a deal to come back.
Melissa, there's a question asking, would graphite paper work as well?
Yes, graphite paper works great. Yeah, I really like Serol graphite paper. In fact, that's what I use to transfer this design to the black paper because you can see graphite on black, okay, but you have to have a lot of light. So, so yeah, you can get graphite paper in black, red, and white, and I think yellow too, which is great. Just going through and tracing everything, hoping I don't forget a line. And I'm a little bit hurried with how I'm tracing this. We don't have to be exact. One of the reasons is because, well, we're not doing it in pen yet, but also we can apply and like look at things once it's transferred and make any micro adjustments that we want to. And this particular card, we have cursive that goes kind of in and out of the holly design, the holly word. So you can do it all in front or all behind, but I do find it creates this fun 3D element when you have the script intertwining around this like stoic block letters. So can you see that? It's pretty light. And this was just using graphite. So it's, I believed I used graphite paper for this and regular graphite for this. You can't really tell a huge difference. So hopefully that is helpful. We're going to start with our holly first. We're going to get the white. So because we're using craft paper, let's do some swatches. The gold is really pretty, but it almost doesn't show through depending upon your lighting. So the gold is really only going to be used as a highlight. The red stands out quite well. And then the white also stands out. So we want to really toggle between the white and the red for our words and then use the gold as our details. But you can switch if you'd rather do the holly in red and jolly in white. That's entirely up to you. If you have other colors, by all means, if you want to go a little less classic, you can get like some pink up in there and do some fun things with that. So play around, have fun with it. So let's start out with our holly. And I'm using the retractable jelly roll pens. These are really, really great. And I find that I want to work in sections. I don't want to outline all of my letters and then color them in. I want to outline and color as I go, because then the pigment of the jelly roll is all still wet. And so then you create this really smooth, almost enamel-like surface with the white. So we want to fill in as we go. So, and this is where, because we're filling it in as we go, if you're drawing everything out instead of tracing, you can create those blocks. And then we're just filling in those blocks. And I'm just pulling down. One of the tricks with Jelly Roll that I have found my kids don't always understand. Pressing hard doesn't always yield the best results. You want to allow that ink to glide through the roller ball. So I just slightly depress the roller ball and allow that ink to just glide right out. Do we have any questions so far? I feel like it's really quiet. So this is the time when you want to get a good podcast or an audio book, even a good movie. Lately, my kids have been watching all of the Harry Potter movies on repeat. So I've created my oval with the O, and I'm just working my way through and coloring in step by step. So once I'm done with this O, I want to show you, you never really know what comes through the screen, but you can tell what is dry and what is not. So you can see it's a little more opaque and matte over here at the top of the H than it is on the O. See if maybe this angle will be a little bit better. You can't quite tell, but there is just a little bit of wetness right here on that O still. So you want to give yourself some time to draw all, like color in the word holly. Maybe a few minutes, not like days. You don't need to go that long. Between writing out your holly and writing jolly. So I already finished my jolly. And we can write jolly. And then we can work on decorating in our envelopes. So I'm going to do jolly. And some of the lines that I already drew didn't come through, right? They're not coming through the white. So I can't remember what was on top of the letters and what was behind the letters. I kind of forgot that. So I want to have a reference. So I have my handout handy. I'm looking at that as a reference on what's in front of and what's behind the holly and the jolly. So I want the top of the J, that downstroke of the J.
Hey, Melissa, there's a couple of questions. One is asking, how long does it take for the white to come out? And then someone is asking, how do you create your own template?
Okay, good questions. How long does it take for the white ink to come out? So if you're struggling with the ink coming out, I haven't had that problem with brand new pens at all, but sometimes you'll like the pen may be sitting for a while. First and foremost, definitely make sure that you store your pens flat if you can. But what happens is let's see if I can get a better angle so you can see what's going on. So on the point of the roller ball, you have a little bit of ink that's dried on the end of the roller ball. Yeah, my camera is having a hard time focusing on that. But so what you can do, a couple things. You can, and I've asked Sakura this and make sure that it's like all okay with them. You dip it in hot water, just the point into the hot water, and then you can rub it on your fingers to get that excess ink off and the roller ball moving. And then just press down on the roller ball, just kind of depress that and work in tiny little circles, and that ink should come out. Sometimes I've had some pens that have been pretty stubborn with the pigment. I didn't store it properly. It was like it was uncapped, or with these, you don't really worry about that quite as much. But sometimes you have to just be a little bit persistent. So getting a little note card and just working on the back of the note card until the pigment comes out. Hopefully that helps. And then, oh, what pen am I using? I'm using the Jelly Roll retractable pen. This is the 08 from Sakura. And what's nice is you can just click it open and closed. I really love these for a lot of reasons. One, as a kid, I was obsessed with Jelly Roll, and I still am. But anytime I'd let anyone use one of my Jelly Roll pens, this cap would inevitably get chewed, and it drove me nuts. So the nice thing about the retractable is that it's already capped, so you don't ever have to worry about that. And Sakura reformulated the ink for the retractable so it doesn't dry out. It's almost like a completely different ink. It's very different from the capped Jelly Rolls. So you don't really run into that same issue. I have left my white Jelly Roll. I have a white, the bold Jelly Roll that I use all the time as a corrector, like an ink corrector. And if I leave it uncapped, I am paying for it by just like drawing little circles and getting the ink to flow better. I don't have that issue so much with these. So hopefully that helps. And then as far as making your own template, that is where, so for these notes specifically, for these handouts, I actually used an iPad and I drafted everything out, or you can use any kind of paper and draft it out and create your own template that you can draw from. And, this is a tidy-ish template, but on my iPad, you can see all the basic pencil markings that I used in order to draft up each one of these letters. And then I printed it out and then did the graphite on the back to create that template. So hopefully that helps answer your question. If I didn't answer your question, feel free to ask it again. So we're moving on to the Jolly. And let's look at this line weight that we have going on here. It's beautiful, but very fine. I kind of want to thicken that up just a little bit. I want it to be just a little bit more substantial. So I'm going through with the right color. And I'm just building that up, almost making that 2 pen widths wide. I'm not creating contrast with this, but you can if you want to. So what I mean by that is I want all of the stroke, every part of the stroke, not just the downstroke, to have the same thickness. So I'm just going through, you can keep it thin. It's really entirely up to you. I have found that the metallic 08 draws a slightly thicker line than the plain pen does. So I do like to build up the classic color just a little bit more. And we could play all day and fuss around with this line weight forever. But let's keep moving. So I'm going to make that J, the top of the J, come underneath the H and the O and circle around. And can you see right here? This was the line that I drew in pencil right here. And this is the line that I wrote in pen. They are slightly different. So I want you to understand that don't feel so much stress and pressure that you have to follow your traced lines exactly. Trust your hand. That curvature of your hand creates beautiful marks. So if your hand kind of goes a little bit wayward, that's okay. That's totally okay. So let's work on the O. We're going to start our O, and this doesn't have any interaction with the word holly, but the L does. And the L, according to our sample, goes over the L and then under the L. And then over the L and under. And then I'm going to draw my flourish again, trusting my hand over the pencil markings that I wrote. So you can see we have that nice curvature. It's still just a little bit different from what I drew. Like you look here, let's compare these two. This bottom curve is just a little bit bigger than that bottom curve, but it's okay. It's still really fun. So I can go through here and thicken up my lines, but let's talk about how to decorate the holly now, how to create this sort of sparkling effect. And we can do that with our gold. So the gold, I'm going to start off in this horizontal line. I'm going to do a dot on each, basically each vertical line, I'm doing a dot. And then from there, I'm doing a dash, and we can do a dash either with the gold or with the red, and I'll show you both. So we've got a dash up. Let's change that so you can see what I'm doing. I'm really just like flicking my pen. Dash down, dash up, dash down. So I'm just creating these little tick marks. I can do that in the red pen as well. It's a little bit more bold, and I don't know that I really like that as much as I like the gold. So I'm going to switch back to gold. And with the Y, I have a branch, so I'm going to tick both sides and then down. So I have that. I'm going to go over my red just to make it consistent. And there we've got our holly jolly. We can add some little stars, which is basically creating a plus and then smoothing that out. I think you can see it a little bit better. Well, we'll do it in white because I want you to be able to see it. Basically create a plus and then you smooth it out. Just you smooth out those harsh corners. Or you could do a little dot. And I like to do those dots in gold because they really only come through when the lighting is right. So it's almost like the card sparkles. And you can always add a tree or a snowman. I am a huge fan of that. Or if you want to, you add 3 dots together and then 2 dashes from either side. Oh, sorry, got to change my view. 2 dashes from either side and create little holly leaves. So just make it festive. Use whatever little elements you want to create that. Now, when it comes to addressing our envelopes, what we want to do first is, so this is a vintage stamp. You want to get your stamp, you want to get a stamp, and you want to make sure that the stamp backing is not adhesive. So if it's ripping it off of the stamp card or pack, it's nice to just have that there to keep your space, to keep that space free so you can write things out, because we are very visual and we want to see what space we can draw in. So having that just there, even if it's not on there, because if you stick the stamp on and then somehow you make a mistake, then you're getting stressed out. We don't want to stress you out when it comes to writing things. And the next thing I do when I'm approaching my envelopes is I am doing something fancy for the name, and you can be whatever style you want to do. Don't worry about legibility. Um, it's not super crucial for the name. I mean, you do want some legibility there, um, but don't worry about the postman needing that to be legible. Really, what the post people need is the zip code. That is the most important thing. So you want to make sure that the zip code is very legible. Everything else you do want to make sure that it's legible, but I like to just do an all caps, keep it condensed and very, very simple. And then we can add those little stars, those dots, and all of a sudden, with very minimal effort, we have a special envelope that's going to a special someone. So we kind of glazed over a lot of things today, and I really hope you learned something, and I hope there was something that you could take from this class and apply to whatever your interests are, especially this holiday season as you make things for people that you love. So if you are so inclined, and if you've made a project from this class, I would love to see it. I'm on social media. I'm at Melissa Fur, like Melissa and calligraphy together. Um, so tag me on Instagram or message me. I'd love to see what you've done. Thank you so much for joining me, and have a good one. Happy holidays.